intimidation. So last week we already covered this different things of doubt that we go ahead and encounter. So pressing towards the mark basically gives us the essence of we're going to reach a goal. We're going to be reaching towards a target of some sort. And in that quest of reaching toward that target, we'll also be we'll be confronting different pieces of doubt. That's what basically yesterday was, or last week was covered for those of you that weren't here last week. And so today we're going to talk about something else that we could be facing when we're pressing towards the mark, which is intimidation. So last week we talked a little bit about King David in the famous story that he has with Goliath. We talked about how King Saul and also his brothers tried sowing doubt, trying to deter him from his goal, which was to glorify God in the situation that they were presented when they were facing the Philistine army. In that, when he goes to face Goliath, we also see that he confronted intimidation. So in 1 Samuel 17, verses 43 to 44, this is the part where he's already facing Goliath on the battlefield. And Goliath looks down on him physically and says, he said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give you your flesh and to the birds and to the wild animals." While we see this, try to put yourself in David's shoes. Physically, he's very, very short compared to Goliath. Goliath is described, I believe, to be over 6 feet tall. And in those days, people didn't really reach up to 6 feet tall due to nutrition or genetics. And as a much shorter man, he was much younger than him. David didn't have as much combat experience as Goliath did. So already he's coming up with an opponent that's physically stronger than him, physically taller than him, and also has years more worth of experience in terms of battlement. Yet, he doesn't deter himself, or he doesn't become intimidated by Goliath's threats. Even though he says that he'll slice him to pieces and he'll leave his remains out so then that any wild animal could just take it, basically leaving him to nothing. David's response is this. In 1 Samuel 17, 45 to 47, so immediately right after Goliath gives his threat, David said to the Philistine, "You come up against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come up against you in the name of the Lord Almighty and the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands and strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give you to the carcasses of the Philistine army, to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those who gather here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, but for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." This promise he doesn't just make to Goliath. This promise he also makes to the whole Philistine army, since Goliath's ultimatum is, if any man can come out and defeat me, the Philistine army will surrender to you. So in essence, David is saying that not only will I take you down, I will also take down the entire army with you. And we could see these in our everyday life when we confront our own giant. They may not be, just in our faces, screaming threats, threatening to kill us, but when we're encountering our own giants, may it be doing something like this, where it's public speaking, or talking to people about God in our everyday lives, or even something simple as maybe taking on the task of learning how to drive a car or learning how to do something different. Everybody has their own giants that they're going to face. And it's important to not let your intimidation get in the way of deterring you from completing your marks and achieving your goals. One of the things that we do need to remember, or a couple of the things that we do need to remember, is while we're resisting intimidation, is recognizing that God will not give us something that we can't handle. Every situation is well suited for us in order to achieve, in order for us to come out the other side. God himself in Jeremiah 1:15 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet to the nations." So He already knows us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He created us. And he created us, created each and every one of us with a purpose. Every situation that we go through in life is made to form us and make us to fulfill the purpose that he has for us. So every situation that that we face is made to with that in mind for us to grow spiritually in him, to be able to rely on him. I remember this one specific doctor who grew up on the field. He ended up becoming a neurosurgeon in the future, but he talks about how his experiences shaped him to do the purpose that he was made to do. Yes, of course, it's not, spiritually being able to do what he had to do, but nonetheless, we could take inspiration from that story in that he compared picking the tomatoes from the field the same way as he had to delicately handle a brain. Just one small wrong move can damage somebody forever if you're touching the wrong neuron. In this essence, everything that we do, every situation that we face will end up helping us in the future. God doesn't let anything go to waste. So even if it's through hardship or through suffering, God will be there with us, and everything happens truly for a reason, that everything will be made and help us in the future. The second point that we have here is our strength comes from the Lord. Of course, there's the famous verse from Philippians 4:13, I could do all things through Christ who gives me strength. It's important to remember that, yes, while God won't give us anything that we can't handle, there are times where he's going to be pushing our limits and making us go out of our comfort zones. And those times, we ourselves may not think that we can handle something, which is where the third point also comes in. The second and third point kind of go hand in hand. We can be our worst enemies. And as we talked about last week, all that doubt really does is that it just plants a seed. We have the choice if we want to nurture it or water it and let it grow into a root, which then turns into a tree. It's easier to remove a seed rather than removing a tree. If we give into intimidation, we also give time for that seed to be able to grow. God's going to push us. Whether we like it or not, God's going to push us to the point where we ourselves believe that we can't keep going forward, where we think that it's too much for us to handle. Again, God won't give us anything that we can't handle, and he knows our own limits. He's testing us to make sure that we also recognize our own limits and we could continue growing. It's sort of the same thing when people talk about God, people being young in the spirit and people being babies in the spirit. God's slowly giving us food that we could chew or that we could swallow as we continue aging and growing. So, somebody who's new in the spirit is only going to be getting like formula. And then little by little, he's going to start giving us spiritual bread. But that's only when we become ready. And we only become ready through the testing that he's going to give us. We could also look at the story of Moses. Moses, of course, ended up becoming a great leader, and he's revered in any Abrahamic religion, if I could remember. And he ended up leading the Israelites out of their captivity in Egypt. Of course, they ended up wandering the desert for 40 years. But even through all of that, he was called to God. He was called by God to lead the Israelites. During Moses' interaction with God during the burning bush, Moses actually argues with God on multiple occasions. He doesn't want to do the calling that was given to him, and he begs God to pass it on to someone else. In Exodus 3:11-12, we see, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. An instance of us giving into intimidation. God just finished telling Moses that he will bring his people out of captivity. He himself feels, I'm assuming, intimidated by the task at hand. No human would, or no rational human being would be given a task that heavy, that immense, without feeling a little bit of fear or a little bit of intimidation at it, since it's something that he himself believes that he won't be able to do. God, of course, tells him that he will be with him. And then in Exodus 4:10-12, we see another instance of Moses arguing with God, arguing with God, trying to pass on this task onto somebody else, saying, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. Moses then responds, But Moses said, Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Even after God finishes telling him that he will be with him, that he will teach him how to talk to people, how to lead his people, Moses still wants this task to be passed on to somebody else. Moses, of course, then ends up, in a way, fulfilling his purpose, doing it so behind Aaron, as Aaron ends up becoming the speaker for him. But Moses does end up achieving what God wanted him to do in the end. And it's only through believing in that God will be able to help us, even in instances when we believe that we can't do it ourselves, will we be able to push past intimidation and being able to reach toward our mark. All right, and that's all that I had for today. In the next part, we're going to go ahead and talk about running toward the giant. So pushing past intimidation and then running toward the thing that stands in our way that stops us from achieving our mark. And then